morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Security Watch India and Indian Eye Security, as many of you would be dealing with our sister concern, which is our business end, we are extremely pleased and happy that you could find the time to be with us today. Today's event is focused much more as we go along with our events. This is probably the third one we're doing in the UK in the last 1 year. And as we go along with our events, we are focusing more and more on the requirements of the industry. As you will have seen with some of the literature that has been given to you, there is quite a bit of information in terms of the general scenario in India as it exists in terms of internal security, and as an American term describes it, that homeland security. We in India, in official circles, still use internal security, but more and more the industry is using the term homeland security. And there is a red booklet, A4 size, which has been given to you, which is a more recent study that Security Watch India has carried out. Without going into more detail, it gives me great pleasure to give you a brief introduction about Mr. Patrick Mercer, OBE, who is obviously very well known to all of you, Tory MP from Newark, but also has had a distinguished military career, as many of you would again know. Mr. Mercer is, I'm doing this all through memory, but I remember reading out his introduction last time in April, so I don't think I'm too badly off the mark, but he's from the Sherwood Foresters Regiment, has been instructor at Staff College, Camberley, and was mentioned in dispatches at least once, if not twice, in Ireland and in other conflict zones, and eventually given the OBE for commanding his battalion in Bosnia. And thereafter, he's been, after leaving the uniform, he's been a well-known presenter on Radio 4 and also writes columns in the Daily Telegraph on matters military, apart from following his passion of writing novels, historical novels. I believe some of them are set in India, and we're looking forward to his presence amongst us next week in Goa. And above all else, Mr. Patrick Mercer is a great supporter and a well-wisher for Security Watch India and Indian Eye Security, and we are indeed grateful to him for all the support he provides. Without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, may I now request Mr. Patrick Mercer to give his medical address.
Well, Maruf, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here this morning. I think this is important that we understand exactly why we're here and what the opportunities are. I don't think any of you can have failed to notice the events that have overtaken India, the subcontinent, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. over the past few months and indeed years. And I suppose really if I wanted to focus on anything that will lead all of us, I trust and hope, to get involved in making the whole of the region a safer and a better place in which to live and to do business. I point to the recent American intervention and the death of Osama bin Laden, obviously on the Pakistan border. Very important events, that, clearly not just the death of one of the greatest bogeymen of the late 20th and indeed the 21st century, but also, I think, indicating the dynamic nature of the change in relationships between two allies, namely Pakistan and America, and the willingness of America to get involved militarily inside internal sovereign affairs of another country. Now, clearly, none of us in this room needs to have pointed out the conflict, difficulties and frictions between the two countries of India and Pakistan, and the huge international questions that hang on the back of that. When you take that particular problem, when you take the fact that the conflict that is going on in Afghanistan at the moment must not be viewed as being a local conflict, it must be seen as being a regional war that stretches right from the borders of Iran at one end up to Russia on the other, both of which of course are nuclear tipped, with Pakistan and India also possessing the same sort of capabilities. Then looking at what our enemies inside this area can do, the recent threat from the Pakistani Taliban, for instance, to occupy parts of military bases inside Pakistan and to threaten the integrity Pakistan's nuclear weapons. Clearly, that puts the whole of what is happening inside India into sharp focus. Security Watch India has had its particular mind, ambitions and thoughts brought to a very close and pointed point of interest by events in Mumbai not so very long ago. What's interesting, you will all have noticed, is that what happened in Mumbai is now being copied by terrorists the world over. Only recently we saw terrorists inside Kabul carrying out almost a carbon copy of what had happened in Mumbai. The understanding of the fact that military conflicts are now pursued in the civilian environment, where targets of high value and iconic buildings and iconic institutions will always provide, as far as our enemies are concerned, the sort of leverage that our enemies know and understand. In other words, not just the ability to kill or to injure, but of course to influence through terror. Now that's why Security Watch India is doing what she is doing. It's important that we understand here and in India itself how we can help one another, how the opportunities that exist from British and European abilities in these fields can be applied quickly and capably in places like India, and of course the other way round. That Security Watch India and India itself has so much to teach us about the way that we do our business. Now, it would be remiss of me not to point out that, of course, this is extremely good for business. There are opportunities here which responsible governments and responsible private sector within those governments must take advantage of. That's why I'm glad that this morning so many of you, so many influential individuals from your various different businesses and concerns have come to listen to what we've got to say. We'll hear a number of very important presentations and some very interesting presentations, but please, ladies and gentlemen, take the opportunity to get to know each other. I think the phrase is networking, isn't it, Richard? Foremost networker probably in the whole of the United Kingdom, sitting in front of me, Richard Kemp. Please get to know each other, please understand what you can do with each other, and please take this opportunity to see where other opportunities exist for you. Thank you very much, enjoy it. I will now get my prompt and introduce the first speaker. Just a moment, please. I will now return the compliment by introducing Mr. Maroof Raza to come and talk to us with a slot that every time I hear Maroof speaking, I learn a little bit more about what his business is and what his take is on the situation that I just described. Maroof is an extraordinarily capable presenter of information and communicator who has a very high profile inside the Indian media. He's currently a mentor of Security Watch India and vice chairman of Indian Eye Security. He's also a strategic affairs consultant and television anchor for Times Now, which is a leading English television channel in India, which I'm sure you all know that. I'm sure you all as well have looked at his books on terrorism, particularly Kashmir and low-intensity conflict. I know that I've learned a great deal from the books that I've picked up, which he's shown me, which are not only knowledgeable, but extremely approachable and extremely easily absorbed. Another former infantry officer. I'm not sure if that speaks well or badly, but there we are. Maroof, ladies and gentlemen, who I'm sure will be able to give us an insight, which so far, I say, every time he speaks, I find him extraordinarily entertaining and very informative. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Maroof.
Mr. Mercer has just raised the bar another few feet for me, so let's hope I can deliver. This presentation has some elements of presentation that was given by me just about a month and a half ago in the House of Commons, but it also has some new information which put together eventually will add up to the package that we are going to be providing to you in terms of information on Homeland Security. There are 30 slides or so in the presentation as far as I can recall, so you'll have to bear with me at least for 30 minutes, if not a few minutes more than that. Security Watch India as Mr. Patrick Mercer brought out, is clearly focusing on issues that concern India and its internal security, especially in the aftermath of 26/11. So in the context of the fact that despite India has stable governance and a growing economy, it has seen considerable number of terrorist attacks happening on Indian soil. This has taken, fortunately for us, a bit of a low key in the last year or two, ever since pressure was built up on Pakistan post 26/11, when it was established, at least to the Indian mind, without doubt, that Pakistan was behind the attack, in as much as we had argued for at least the last 2 decades to the international community and the US in particular, that Pakistan was clearly orchestrating cross-border terror attacks as an extension of their foreign policy, which has now, interestingly, ladies and gentlemen, come to light by a rather revealing book by a gentleman called Bruce Rydell called Deadly Embrace, which I just reviewed for a newspaper before I left India. And that really says everything that India has been saying for the last 20 years. Bruce Rydell was a CIA operative and advisor to 4 US presidents, including Barack Obama, on Pakistan and Afghanistan, and he's really pretty much spilled the beans. India has a number of homeland security and internal security elements and forces, so therefore to understand how to do business in India is very important, and who you should be targeting, because as I'll go on with my presentation, that there are several layers of homeland security. There is the armed forces are vaguely involved in it in as much as preventing cross-border attacks, but the armed forces are clearly involved in battling insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. But then the rest of the country does see central police organizations. Mr. Mehra headed one of them, large organizations, some of them going into sizes as much as 200 to 400,000 troops, which is much larger than the British Army put together, as I understand. And these forces come under the central government, whereas we have state police forces, and India has 28 states, and being federal by the way the constitution is designed India to be, so the state police is very much under the state chief minister, who's got more or less similar powers like a US state governor. However, the expenditure on homeland security in India is much, much lower than what we spend on defense. It's less than 1% of GDP. Defense spending in India is in the range of 2.4%, going up to 2.5%. And yet the infrastructure collectively falls well below the required statistics. For instance, no state in India comes close to the UN figure of 222 policemen per 100,000 citizens. And therefore, there is a dire shortage, despite a country having abundant manpower, there is a dire shortage of trained and officially equipped manpower to deal with homeland security. India's internal security scenario is somewhat influenced by the proximity and on its border of countries like Pakistan in particular. The relationship with China is different. It is disputed on the borders, but China doesn't now, at least, directly influence internal issues. There was a belief sometime in the 50s and 60s that India's northeast, which is that block there, was influenced by insurgencies in the 7 states of the North, often referred to as the 7 Sisters, Namat, which is NAMMAT, which is an acronym made up of the first letters of the 7 states. They all had some element or the other of Chinese-trained insurgents. But now more and more, India has Maoism in that big red blob in its center right, where I'll talk more about. They are influenced by Chairman Mao's philosophy that power comes from the barrel of the gun, but are not directly influenced by China beyond the point. Okay, Kashmir insurgency. Now, where are the homeland threats? There is the Kashmir insurgency. I don't want to go more into that, but Kashmir insurgency, in effect, is the cause of a spillover effect in the rest of India, and Pakistanis, and many Pakistani, responsible Pakistani gentlemen, such as some as senior as the former Home Secretary of Pakistan and Interior Ministers of Pakistan, in television debates have argued with me that you solve Kashmir and you won't have terror problem, ipso facto implying that Kashmir is at the root of Pakistan using terror as an extension of policy to arm twist India. but give or take a little, the situation in Kashmir runs on 7-year cycles and is more or less stable now. We are now into the third 7-year cycle since the insurgency started. And really where we fail is not in being able to provide equipment or in training or capability of our armed forces. We've failed because the government and the civilian elite have failed to come up with solutions to Kashmir. In short, as I once told the Home Minister of India, that you solve the problems in Kashmir, you won't have the problem of Kashmir. So that's really the bottom line. I don't want to go too much into Kashmir because that's a separate debate. Then we have the key cities in India, and the cities in India are by itself, we've done in this presentation a case study of 2 key cities, Delhi and Mumbai, to give you an idea of how 2 very major cities, Delhi being India's Washington and Mumbai being India's New York, have their own threats, and are they really up to speed in dealing with it. That big blob in the center is Maoist insurgency, and that's what I'm going to talk to you some more about, because our focus today in our business initiatives that we would like to suggest to you would be to focus perhaps on those states and try and come up with solutions that what those states require. My colleagues here, Sanjeev Puri in particular, have been interacting with the government in those states. I've also interacted. Mr. Mehra is well known to the governor of some of those states, having been a very senior policeman. So therefore, we have already made sufficient inroads, but more about that a little later. There are multiple secessionist movements in India's northeast that circle on your right-hand side. But the interesting one single dimension of India's northeastern insurgency is that since 1954, when India first began to use military force against the insurgent groups there in the land, and then there have been ups and downs in the whole effort of the Indian government to try and curtail the insurgency. The first factor that really emerges, if you look at the insurgency there, is that it's been consistently low-key. Secondly, it's an insurgency, so it's not really terrorism per se, where they attack targets without thought and try to seek publicity specifically on the base of the dramaticness of their attack, but target instead government installations, and therefore the common man, though certainly inconvenienced by the governmental response to the threat to government installations and government forces, does not necessarily feel threatened beyond a point, in as much as people have begun to feel insecure in cities in India after the attack on Mumbai, and has been faced by many other cities in India over the last several years. In fact, to give you a bit of a backdrop, the copy of the magazine Salute, which is with you, there's an essay by me which gives India's entire experience over the last 40, 50 years, and will give you a whole idea of what we are battling with. The government is battling, not trying to come to solutions with the ideas the insurgents and terrorists are pushing with the common man, but they are trying to just address what the government feels, the wickedness of terrorist commanders and individuals or insurgent commanders, and therefore these are short-term solutions. There isn't really an effort to think long-term, because things have been happening with such quick succession that it has left very little time to come up with long-term planning and strategy. The government is left more in a firefighting mode. There is also the threat of coastal attacks on India. So India has several threats, and the focus areas therefore of the government is in the Maoist area, from domination of the area to developmental activities, which the government tragically in India begins to address primarily when the situation begins to go out of hand. But if they address the problems initially, the insurgents would not find support and cause with the common man, and therefore it's something which governance being neglected leads to insurgencies, and insurgencies all over the world have a similar story to tell. Government is now trying to increase police effectiveness, intensify patrolling, clear the roads, road opening patrols, do a certain amount of counterinsurgency operation, but largely this area has virtually no involvement of India's armed forces, and the police in India were traditionally not recruited to battle insurgencies. So they are going through a steep learning curve, and the debate within police quarters is whether they should increase the number of police forces per se and come to a certain level where physical domination of the ground will give the governmental forces some superiority, or since that is a time-consuming process to have trained policemen doing an infantryman's job in the jungles, could there be a quicker solution through absorption of technology? And that's where you all will come in. We have Kashmir. Kashmir has a certain scope for industry to move in terms of border surveillance devices, cameras, UAVs, aerial patrolling vehicles, etc. But bulk of Kashmir's security is handled centrally by Delhi, in as much as in the Maoist area, the security largely is still very much a call that is taken by the local chief ministers. So therefore, in terms of being able to sell your technology, here in the Maoist areas, you would be dealing more with the local governments, the state governments, and where we'd be happy to provide you a helping hand. A route out would be to take Security Watch India's membership, and thereafter we facilitate your business there. And those details are given to you in a piece of paper. Kashmir, you would have to largely focus a lot of your stuff through Delhi. Again, my colleagues have been in the business, even in Kashmir, to provide passive technologies such as blankets and all-weather kind of equipment that the troops would need in extremely harsh winter. Parts of Kashmir rank amongst the coldest places on earth. Northeast insurgency, low-key insurgency, border patrolling. Yes, there is scope for moving in technology there, but as yet, I think the governments in the Northeast haven't really looked beyond Delhi for advice and assistance. A point that might be of interest to all of you, and I'll take this opportunity to announce this at this event here, that we at Security Watch India and Indian Eye Security are going to be holding Asia's first counter-terror expo in London between 20th and 22nd of May next year. We've just finalized the venue yesterday at the Business Design Center at Islington next to Hilton. And we will be getting state representatives from various governments here to come and tell you the story, what their states need, in as much as also inviting people from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Middle East, Central Asia, and other parts of Asia where they can come. So really, Asia under one roof being brought to you in London, 22nd May next year. So that's the current focus area of the government. And finally, in centers, urban centers, the cities, the focus is a bit different. It's on intelligence gathering, it's active interception, it is on emergency response preparedness, investigation, forensic activity, and major events and critical infrastructure security, just as we faced right now with the Commonwealth Games, which to all our apprehension, fortunately went through without a hiccup. Okay, so what are the threat scenarios that operate in India? There is the low publicity threats that comes from abduction, ambushes, low profile assassinations, as well as high damage but low publicity, that is critical infrastructure damage or cyber attacks. But high publicity events could be another Mumbai, 26/11, high profile assassination, abductions. Dirty bombs, rudimentary nuclear device, diffusion device, which terrorists can assemble with radioactive material, and you would have big cities in panic. Attack on major events in crowded places. This has happened in the past. Terrorists tend to, in India, Pakistan-sponsored terrorist groups tend to attack large gatherings of people during festival time, or religious congregations, or religious places to create communal strife, so that the idea of India doesn't look as good as it does. So what are the threats and challenges and the needs? I've explained to you some of that. Kashmir, we've got left-wing extremism, Maoists, Northeast, and plots against cities. The challenges are all laid out. I mean, just to go through the laundry list will take a while, but basically it could range from suicide attacks to IED attacks, to public unrest and 26/11 type attacks, and a lot of other small stuff thrown in between. What are the needs? It could range from personal protection gear, riot control equipment for police, surveillance equipment, signal intercept technology, high altitude combat gear, aircraft for troop movement, counter ID equipment, critical infrastructure security, automated security systems, communication gear, intelligence analysis software, personal protection gear, riot control equipment, surveillance equipment, SWAT gear and training, which is becoming very popular with the police, major event security, large infrastructure security, intelligence gathering analysis, explosive detection equipment, CBRNE protection, which is again becoming quite popular. I believe somebody known to us and who's been in touch with, I think I see Matt at the end there, but we were hoping for him to get business in one of the states in India. Mobility through land and air and coastal security. The homeland security in India is a balancing act. The state police acts as the primary with jurisdiction for counterinsurgency and terrorism threats within the states. So you have, as some of you may be having tourism interests in India, so you have the state of Rajasthan, which has its own police and popular tourism destination. And you have the state of Maharashtra, in which Mumbai falls. So unlike Delhi, which has central policing and security, Mumbai is protected by the Maharashtra state police. So because it's the state capital of Maharashtra. So that is the difference that you need to understand. I'm emphasizing this again and again because it's the key to how you will do business in India. Central government, especially the Ministry of Home Affairs, provides intelligence, financial support, planning and manpower support. Homeland security structure at the state level. You have the chief minister of the state, really a mini prime minister, and many of them run states the size, larger in size than many countries in the world. I mean, take the state of Uttar Pradesh. I think the population of Uttar Pradesh would still be over 100 million. So you have a chief minister presiding over it, and that lady is getting more and more efficient and ruthless by the day. Interaction and support from the central government does take place, but you have also the state home department. So you have a Ministry of Home in Delhi, which interacts closely with the state home department. The bureaucrats, being what they are, like to guard their own turf of interest. So they will up to a point take inputs from the central government in Delhi, but really take their own decisions. And as I'll bring out in my presentation, that they have budgets which are fairly substantial to do purchases and security activity. Coordination with central paramilitary forces. Classically, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, you have a chief minister there, but he has to coordinate quite extensively with what they call the unified command, because you have the central government forces in Kashmir, you have the army, you have the border security force, you have the central reserve police force, you have a whole lot of other intelligence agencies that are operating, and the chief minister's job in J&K, Kashmir especially, is a rather unpleasant one. State police organizations have their own bodies which reflect the same structure that the central government has. So there is a lot of overlap, but then there are turfs. Now, just to give you an idea, at the central level, you can see the number of agencies that are involved with internal security. You have Ministry of Railways, Ministry of Public Personnel, Central Paramilitary Forces, Central Police Forces, Ministry of Home Affairs, special agencies. Ministry of Defense, interestingly, is involved with the Homeland Security quite specifically in the area of coastal security, because the Coast Guards in India are under the MOD, whereas the Border Security Force, which is the land equivalent of Coast Guards, is under the Ministry of Home. So it's complicated, there's a whole history to it. And then you have the Ministry of Finance, which controls the purse strings. So some of this was shown to you last time, but you know, there are opportunities in the railway sector, the civil aviation sector, the intercity transit systems, the maritime system. The sheer volume of people that move across India every day